We're just going to wait for hopefully a few more to join and we'll make a start. There we go. Hello, Abby.
Hello.
Hello, thanks for coming. We're expecting a few more, so I'm just going to give it another minute or two and we'll make a start shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll start in just a minute's time. This is being recorded, so if you ever want to refer back, you will be able to get a copy. And you should be able to see the opening slide on your screens. Okay, let's make a start. We're 3 minutes over, so we'll start here. And if the others join, then that's great. So welcome. My name is Chris, and I'm going to be running the session today. This session is all about home engagement. It's targeted at upper management, senior management, but in reality, it could be used at any level. It's just the way we've written it assumes you have a certain level of access to some of the data. So my name is Chris. I'm an IT lecturer at Exeter College and an IT course manager. I'm also an EdTech demonstrator, mainly due to my passion about suitable technology in education. I think it's really important, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and obviously during, that we make effective use of technology in all of our subjects and all of our lessons. And actually, some of the stuff we're covering can be quite simple. We just need to remember to put it in place. So hopefully this session is useful for you. And at the end of the session, there'll be time for Q&A to allow you to ask away, and please do. So as I mentioned, I work for Exeter College, and we are one of 12 Microsoft Showcase colleges in the UK, one of the first, and we're an EdTech Demonstrator college. We cover the Southwest, although being webinars, we can cover everywhere, which is great. We're rated Ofsted Outstanding, and most importantly, Exeter College covers a huge area in terms of land mass, but also the number of students that we have. We have around 10,000 to 12,000 students if you include our adult HE part-time apprentices and so on, or around 6,500 16 to 18-year-olds. So either way, quite a few, and it's been a challenge at times to make sure everyone's online, learning, and most importantly, engaging. But what we're going to talk about today can be used in a school setting of 50 students or 3,000. It doesn't really matter. The platform is the same and the methods are the same. So let's make a start. So when I was given the brief for this session, I didn't want to go all out and dive straight in the deep end. I wanted to make sure that we look at what we're really trying to find out. So I've started with this, and it says engagement with both families and students when offsite is key to ensure continued learning. As I'm sure you're aware, one of the challenges that a lot of schools and colleges are facing right now, whether that's reception and primary, secondary, or FE, or even universities, is keeping students engaged and keeping track of whether they are engaged or not. We can assume they are very easily, but actually, we want to know what they're doing and how they're getting on in more ways than just looking at a piece of work they might have handed in. So digital solutions help your curriculum and enable students to remain social when they're off site. And we're going to look at some of the platforms we can use and some of the methods we can use to ensure that's the case. Now, some of the things I'm going to be talking about today are based on Microsoft technologies because obviously we're a Microsoft based college, but that doesn't mean the theories can't be carried across to Google Classroom and other classroom bits of software like Moodle or Blackboard. It doesn't really matter what you're using, but the screenshots that I'm going to be sharing are based on Microsoft tech. So let's define what we're trying to achieve here. The first thing is, and I think the most important and sometimes overlooked by maybe DFE, is student well-being. I don't want to I don't want to say things I shouldn't, but I think student well-being is one of the most important things that is often overlooked because it doesn't appear on graphs or on charts or papers all that well, whereas pass rates, success rates, engagement rates do. But actually, the first thing we need to do is manage our student well-being, and some of the tools we'll show you later on will help us do that. The second, I think, most important thing is parental understanding and engagement. If we get the parents on board, and I'm sure you know some of this, if we get the parents on board and if we get them to understand the tech, the platforms, and the methods we're using, we will naturally increase engagement. Just as students might switch off if they don't understand or can't grasp the concept, parents will do the same. We want to ensure our learning continues as best as we can. The expectation between schools does vary. I'm just going to let Louise a little bit into the thing. There we go. The expectation between schools does vary, but in reality, because of some of the assessment decisions and the perhaps delayed announcement in some of it, we have to ensure that our learning continues as best as we possibly can, whilst looking at student well-being as a first priority. And the fourth thing that I want to cover is pastoral support. So I really want to ensure that just like we'd have tutorial at school or one-to-one time at school, I really want to ensure that we're using some of these platforms to ensure that our both able and less able students are able to receive the support they need, whether that's from a tutor or from the pastoral team. So I'd like you to answer this quick poll, which is going to appear in your Teams shortly, as long as I can type quickly. And it's going to say, let me do it on this one. The question is going to be, how would you rate your student engagement online? Okay, the poll isn't showing, so let's just do it via our microphones. Let's use the old-fashioned method. Would anyone like to share how they might rate their student engagement? Can you rate your student engagement?
Because we're using Teams, it's really helpful because it counts how many come back in and really easily tracks whether they've viewed it, not viewed it at all, handed it in, and then when we've returned it. Luckily in my class I've got 24 children, and I'd say on average I've got about 20 of them accessing and returning the English and maths every day, so I rate that quite highly. We've not and we talk about these sorts of numbers because we're a relatively small school. We're a single form entry and one teacher per class bar one job share, so it's quite easy to keep a track, informal track I suppose, on the engagement, and if any concerns come up, and we just discuss those on an individual basis, but that might not be easier in larger settings, I can imagine.
I'm slightly envious of the single form entry and managing a few hundred children. But as you mentioned, some of the techniques there with your Teams platform, the techniques are the same. So, we can use this EdTech to help us manage relatively small numbers or much, much larger numbers. So that's great. Thanks, Abby. Kim or Louise, do you have anything to raise?
Yeah, we are 460 in our school. We're pretty big primary. We did a poll last week and we had 94% of children engaged online, and that's defined as having posting 4 days in 1 week. So they were posting maths and English on 4 separate occasions. So 94%, we were really quite pleased with that.
That sounds excellent. Yeah.
Really, really hard to reach ones, obviously, that we're on the phone to every day, but we're not physically seeing learning. So with those children, it's really those, that kind of 6% that we're still working with. But
yeah. And how does that compare to your, or Abby, how does that compare to your normal attendance? Do you normally have about 5% absent?
It's much better. Attendance
Oh, right.
Attendance has been, well, it depends how we've worked it in our primary. If they are in school, they're in school every day. So attendance in school has been better. And then the attendance or the learning that we've been receiving at home is in line with our usual attendance as well. So
I think that's excellent. Yeah.
Great. Lots of messaging and lots of encouragement. But you're going to talk about that in a minute, hopefully.
Of course. Yeah. I don't think I've got all the answers, but hopefully some of the things we can discuss and introduce might help. So thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to the data side of things, which is measuring it. Now, I'm going to try and get names here. Abby, I think you're probably doing this, so pardon me if it's, excuse me if it's kind of repeating, but what we're going to be showing you is class insights. So Teams has a feature called Insights, which it can be enabled for free if you're using Teams, the education version. And Google Classroom has a similar thing, although not as detailed. So to understand the current impact or engagement, we need to measure it. And Microsoft Teams Insights is our preferred method, and by the sounds of it, some of your preferred methods as well. So has anyone here, I think Abby, you said you've used it. Has anyone else used Insights before? No, Kim hasn't. Louise, have you used it?
No, I haven't. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can. Yeah, great.
Oh, okay,
welcome.
Yeah. No, I haven't.
Okay, no problem. Well, we're going to go through it. And I've had to take screenshots. Some of these are not mine. These are from the Microsoft site. And some of them later on you'll see are mine, but I've had to blur a lot because, being Insights, it's data. And I'd love to show you everything, but it has a lot of private data on there of my students, because obviously my day-to-day job is teaching. So I hope the screenshots can put across what I want to show you without being kind of a live demo. So this is Classroom Insights. So on the left-hand side of your Teams window, this applies for all teachers, by the way, not just S. There's a window that opens, and Insights is one of the items on the list. There's lots of other things, lots of other plugins, but Insights is one of them, and it's made by Microsoft, but it's not on there in most cases by default, which I would argue that it should be, but it's not. So what we can do is click on the 3 dots and then click on, and Insights will appear, and then we can click on it again, right click, and it's say pin. That will then pin it to the side of our bar, just like these other items here. So you do it once and it's there forever. You haven't got to do it every time. So we can add Insights, and once you've done that, you can then see here, you can then see all of the data, or an overview of the data for each of the classes. Now, in this case, they've set it up as is in the US, it's US screenshot. So English grade 10, English grade 11, or whatever it is, and the number of students in each. But it could be by year group, it could be by subject, it could be by unit, depending on what you teach, the level and the number of students. In our case, and this does differ between schools, but in our case, in the IT faculty, we have the group, the tutor group, let's call them group A, and then we can dive into that and we have their units, or their subjects, if you like, within each. So the different topics they're studying with different teachers. And that works for us. But in primary or secondary, I can imagine you would have year 9A, and then you'd have English, maths, science, and so on, and you could go through. But the way you've set Teams up doesn't really matter. Insights will read it and it will apply your groupings to the data that it can present. So there's no extra setup needed. It's tracking it as soon as you enable it. So once you've done that, you can see on the right-hand side some of the data you can get. We can see, I think the most important one is the inactive students. So we can see who's inactive. And if I click on that, it would show me the name of the student as well. I can see the number of absences from meetings. Now, unfortunately, because Teams was a business tool to start with, they still refer to lessons as meetings, but it's the same thing. So the number of calls or lessons or appointments, whatever you want to call it, that have been missed. And again, I could click on the orange and it would show me who that is. The number of active students per day, and just out of shot, there is a scale. So I could have, 10, 20, 30, whatever. And on the right-hand side, I can see the average time spent by each student per day. Now, that is the average time spent in the meetings or in the calls. That doesn't mean they're not doing work in the other hours. It's something you've got to take into account. So this must be enabled by IT administrators to start with across the whole school or college. But by default, and this would be more of an IT admin topic, but by default it should be. But if you don't get the insights option when you click on the 3 dots and search for it from the little pop-up window, contact your IT support company or department and they'll have to enable it just once, and then the whole school will have access to it and all the teachers. So that is an overview of what it looks like. Now let's look at some real data. So this is my insights view, and you can see up here at the very top, it's quite small, that I have the class code. That's how we manage our classes, and the code means I can tell the level and the group and the subject they're studying. And I've blurred out their names, but each one of these colored icons is a name, I'm sure you can imagine. And I can see here, this is actually an apprenticeship group that I taught last term. And I can see that their activity is relatively easily mapped onto this grid. So the left-hand line here is 9 a.m. So I had a couple of keen ones at 20 to 9, and then the majority joined at 9 a.m. And then we have lunch, and then they joined again about 1 o'clock till about what is that? Up 4:15 or something like that. Now this one here actually had a hospital appointment. He told me about it at that time, so he left and came back. So we can. This doesn't replace communication. All right. This is just a tool in addition to some of the standard communication that a tutor might receive. But it's also nice to back up that they actually did log off. They weren't just kind of playing video games in the meantime. He actually did go for an appointment. So this automatically tracks all digital activity. So this is not just, unlike the previous screenshots, this grid here, which you get by clicking on a group that I showed you just now. This grid shows all digital activity, which is great, which includes things like working on a task in Class Notebook or Teams. Now, you have to set it up through Teams for it to work, but it's relatively straightforward. Students should be logged in and active to be measured, so they need to be taking part in the chat or the call or both. And then it shows up as a blue line. Now, I can click on these lines here, and I can zoom in and see more data. I can see the exact time and what they were doing, which I'll show you in a moment. But as an abstract view, it's really easy to see, oh, this student here, that one there, didn't attend at all. Now, that student actually has moved courses, so I wasn't expecting them to be there. But you can very, very quickly see, as Kim, you said earlier, that 3 or 4% aren't attending, and you can confirm that using the insights data. So this is just supporting data. It's not our only method. We have registers, of course. We have, tutorial, pastoral support, all that sort of thing. But it's just to back up what we think is happening. And I think, to a certain extent, the more data you have to back up what you think is going on, the more sure you can be of it actually going on. So as of last week, as a college, we've actually moved to an engagement measure based on both participation and output. Which means we can then mark them as present. Because in some classes, we were having an issue with ghosting. We called it ghosting, where students would log in. And you've got to remember, our students are 16 to 20 plus, mainly 16 to 18, but 16 plus. And some of them had cottoned onto the fact that they could ghost. So they could attend, in which case, and send the odd message, in which case they'd appear on the blue bars. But they wouldn't actually be there all that much, or certainly not taking part. So as much as the insights tells you, you obviously have to use your teacher head as well to measure the output or the participation in group tasks or submissions or whatever, which by the sounds of it you are doing anyway, but it's just worth keeping in mind. Now this, I've put device access because it's obviously based on device access. We do have students who don't have a device, they're sharing with brothers, sisters, parents, and so on, or who don't have broadband that's reliable enough, especially down here in Devon. Some of them live really quite out in the sticks, and although much of Devon is now fibre or very fast broadband, there are bits that are very, very unreliable, even with the 4G modems that have been provided. So this also, it doesn't just help measure those that are ghosting, as we call it, but it also helps measure those that would otherwise have been penalized because they're not being marked present because they can't be on that call at 9 a.m. because Jimmy, their brother, is using the laptop between 5 people in the house. So we take device access into account, and it just means we can mark them present even if they did the task a few hours later, having watched the lecture or the lesson back. Okay, so this is what happens when you zoom in a bit and click on one of those colored lines. So you can see here that this student attended, and bear in mind the apprenticeship method is a different one to all of our other lessons. It's a whole day session, 1 day a week. They attended 324 minutes out of 326, which, to be fair, is not bad. I'll give them 2 minutes off. They edited 1 document because that was one of the tasks they had to do, and they sent 2 messages in the chat. Now that is a very low number because they're actually, all the apprentices are very happy on camera and using their microphones, whereas many of our other students prefer text chat over microphones, despite fancying themselves as streamers and YouTube stars, but they don't like the camera. They do prefer text chat. So normally that would show 50, 60 messages rather than 2. But there we go. You can see he logged in at 8:58. I can see that he didn't actually log off at all, whereas some do. And then come back, and I can see that he edited, and I say he because there were no girls in the group, so he edited ports.docx on that occasion. So that tells me that this person's been really well engaged. So you can see that on any of the students in any of their lessons by clicking on that bluey purple line, all there to see. So this is obviously very different to how a normal class might look. They might have half an hour or hour lessons where you'd have lots of little blue lines that you could click on, but the data is still there. It would just show out of 60 minutes rather than 326. So I think actually it's all very well saying we can measure all these bits and pieces, but we need to define what we could measure and what we should measure. Do I really care that the person wasn't logged in for 2 minutes of the day? No. Do I really care that he had ports.docx open for X minutes? Not really, as long as he did the work. So our students aren't robots, or any students aren't robots pumping out worksheets. Let's remember they're still people who need support. And actually, some of this data can tell us a lot more that we don't know, such as household situation, device access, broadband reliability, and even the fact that students, as I'm sure many of yours are now feeling pretty exhausted coming up to half term. Even on a day-to-day basis, the morning is pretty good, especially with teenagers. The mid-morning is fine, because we go to 4:30. By 3:30, 4 o'clock, you're not getting an awful lot compared to the morning. And obviously the engagement rates on insights would show that. So you can support, with data what you think you're seeing elsewhere. Now, there isn't a big button that says fix this, please, on Teams. That's down to teachers, down to management. But I do think it can really help give us an insight into looking at what we can and should tackle and what we can look beyond. Are there any thoughts from the people in this call so far based on what we should and could track, or what you'd like to track?
I think it's interesting from your point of view, from a college perspective, and the difference in the age of the children compared to the primary school children, because I wonder if, to a degree, we're having a little bit more interaction with the parents than you might be on a more regular basis, just because we do wellbeing phone calls at least every fortnight, if not more often, especially for the vulnerable children. And it's the parents that pick up the phone, and sometimes we'll get a little chat with the children, but I'm sure you know what a 6 or 7 year old's telephone conversation ability is like. Yeah. So we do rely a little bit more on the parents to be giving us a bit more of a bigger picture, we hope. We understand that they're juggling a lot, and that they'd like us to think that they're, doing very well. We're very open to the realistic point of view, which is actually that everybody's going through it, particularly juggling homeschool with whatever work commitments they might have. So we do take that into account with everything. And again, we know that we've got this role of what we should be putting out, and we should be following the guidance X, Y, Z. But actually, the reality, we do pare that back, and we've all decided what we are expecting as a minimum, and it is that maths and English activity, hopefully every day, even though the guidance is that it should be either 3 or 4 hours a day.
Yes, I think it's hugely valid. I mean, in some schools, because I work with many schools, admittedly almost all secondary or college based, but the theory applies. Some students, no matter their age, are able to fly through the tasks. They've got their own laptops, and they've got amazing home environments they're very lucky to grow up in, both maybe financial but also supportive. You need a laptop for lockdown, here's one, sort of thing. And we have others who are working on a 5-year-old phone, who have borrowed college laptops, and we've sent out a lot. I don't know the numbers, Rachel might, but a lot of laptops to those that need them, and we still have a few left. But yes, I completely agree. And when going back to the parental phone calls, when we phone up, the students answer usually, which is a good thing, because our first port of call is their mobile phone, and then it's on to the parents. If we need the student to engage with us and talk to us and share what they're feeling, we want to talk to them first, because they're able to, and then we go to the parent. Whereas I think in primary and even secondary, it's flipped. My wife's a primary school teacher, so I know exactly what you guys are going through as well. And it's very interesting how, although our support needs are similar, we go about it in different ways. But either way, the data we're discussing can support those needs. We're not there to argue with parents. We're not there to disagree, but we can say, you know what? Actually, they haven't logged in for the last 2 days. Are you sure they're logging in? They might be telling you they are, but are you sure? Particularly for the years 5, 6, 7, going up into lower secondary and upper. I think it's very important that, as much as students want to tell the parents they're logging in all the time, are they? Or are they doing what they should? So.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a really good way to open up that conversation, where more along the lines of the well-being side of things, that actually if there is a sort of drop-off in engagement, then it might be just because they're really struggling to get them motivated, but actually it might be an indication of something a little bit of a bigger problem, quite possibly. And so by tracking the engagement of the children, there have been occasions where we've made a phone call a lot more quickly than we might have on a different occasion, just to say that we've not explicitly, we're worried because, or we just noticed that, and then it opens up that conversation.
Yeah, and the data just helps start that off, doesn't it? It's not there to counteract or to evidence in a court of law, but it's just kind of, this is what we're finding, and how can we help? Absolutely. That's it, isn't it? Great. I've just seen that Louise in the chat has said, I missed it a few minutes ago, but has said that the attendance in their school varies between 28 and 30 out of 32. So that's, I think that's very good. And it's reflective of what you were saying as well, that it's in the high 90s, which is fantastic. I know with some of my classes, I teach level 2 GCSE equivalent all the way up to level 4. My level 2s in some cases are attending a lot more than they did in class, because they live, miles away. There's no train to get, there's no bus to get, and they can log in. The commute is from their bedroom to their desk, often in the same place. So it's very interesting how different students have taken it, isn't it? So, okay, let's go through the next couple of bits. So the next section is called Support and Embrace, and this is, I think, I've got some resources for you on this as well, which you're welcome to send out to parents. They're written for parents. But I think one of the most important bits, great, we can track all the data, and I recommend you do with Insights and other platforms and other tools. But if we don't support the parents and keep them informed and communicate with our students, then, as you know, we're going to start to struggle. So there is a resource that I'll be giving you after this call. And I didn't write it. It was written by I think by Microsoft. It's a Teams guide for parents, which is fantastic because it's written in a normal way, not by a techie, but just for people that can, for anyone to understand. So I'm going to go through some of the bullet points, and then feel free to raise your thoughts as we go. The majority of parents won't really know what digital learning entails. Even now, I think a lot of parents are kind of, well, he's logged in or she's logged in for quite a few hours a day, but I'm not really sure what they do. And that, I think that's especially applicable for those that aren't, unlike primary, aren't sat next to their son or daughter for the morning or the afternoon or both, when they just kind of let them get on. And this document can help with that. We must ensure that they're informed via frequent communication. And we have discussed how it's really important to raise our concerns, but I also, every Friday, I try and send out 2 or 3 emails praising some of my students to their parents. I don't email the student, I email the parent, and then they pass it on to the student, which is really nice because I can tell students they've done really well in class, that's fine. But for a parent to receive it, when normally most of my emails, or I was going to say letters, but no, just emails, are concerns or misconducts or whatever, I think it's really nice to send out Jimmy did really well, and so did Sarah, and so did Johnny. Just a generic email. In this lesson, they did really well. Their engagement's been amazing this week. They've been engaged for 95%. I don't make it too long or too stat heavy. I just make it a nice kind of boost into their week, because they are exhausted, as are our students. I also keep them in the loop, and I think most importantly on side, because when I need them, they're there for me in most cases, especially if I've sent praise about their young person in the week or in the last few weeks. Having said that, if they're not on form and they're not doing what they should, they'll know about it as well. So they know it goes both ways, and the students know that I will contact their parents both ways if I need to. I do use students as, especially my in college, it's the 16 plus, the older ones. They are my first port of call at all times, and then parents if I need to. The other section says communicate with students, and I think students, as I'm sure you guys would support, miss in-person communication. It doesn't matter whether they are 4, 5, or 15, 20, 16, 17, 18, whatever. They miss in-person communication as much as my IT geek students would claim they don't. They do. And although some of them say, oh, I love being in the bedroom, the curtain's shut, it's dark and no, they actually like being with each other and actually talking. So we try to encourage the use of webcams. Now, we haven't forced this in IT. We haven't forced this because some of our students don't want to, and they feel more vulnerable. Even with a background on, they'd rather not be, and that's fine. But we do try and encourage use of webcams. And when we implemented this engagement attendance tactic or method approach, we also implemented a please use webcams message, if you feel comfortable, in brackets. And immediately the engagement went up. I didn't change anything. Staff didn't change what they were doing, but students kept an eye on each other, and the ownership of their learning increased. It's all about, especially with those that can work independently, it's all about saying, giving them the chance to own their learning, giving them the chance to be able to say, you know what, I did a really good job this week. Maybe it wasn't as good as I do in college or in school, but I did a really good job compared to what I've done before. And that doesn't matter whether they got a pass, which they wouldn't normally get, or a distinction. It doesn't matter. It's just being, accountable to themselves. And I think that's a really important message, which we are pushing to all of our students. They may be disconnected physically, but they are not disconnected completely. I also, and this might be teaching you to suck eggs, but I also encourage you to build your lessons based on what works well. We do this in the classroom anyway, and we try and tweak our lessons based on what we see. So, we're all used to teaching in a classroom, standing at the front for a while and using the whiteboard and so on. But then we walk around and see what's going on, and by walking around, we naturally tweak what we're going to do. So I need another 5 minutes on this task. I'm going to change this task over to this one, etc., etc. And I think in some cases, we're missing that online. So there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, and I do this all the time, we're going to pause on that and we're going to go over and do this thing, whether it's a YouTube video or a task or a breakout room or whatever it is, a mind map, and we're going to come back to this later on. If it's tomorrow, great. If it's in 10 minutes time, fine. It's just about tweaking the input and the lesson based on what's going on in front of you right now. And as I mentioned before, webcams help us view that as well. So even if I get half of my cameras on with the students, that's enough. I can see based on their reactions and their faces and how tired they are and so on, whether they're working, I can see what needs to be done. Whereas teaching blind without any of that is very, very difficult to be able to tweak. And you're just looking at what's coming back in, which could be half an hour later. So you've wasted that time. So as I mentioned, I think it's really important. One of my favorite words right now is to give ownership of students, ownership of their learning and consequences if they don't try. So, they haven't got to get the highest grades, but if they don't try and they don't engage, then we'll have to kind of see what we can do to help them with that. And an example. So it's all very well talking the theory, but being an active teacher for day in, day out, I like to give real examples. And my example is Canva, which is Canva, which is a graphics tool, a website. It has a free version and some of it's paid, but the students use the free version, and effectively it allows students without any IT skills really to build some really nice infographics, posters, flowcharts, that sort of thing. Something that's quite difficult. They can all make a very boring slideshow or a very bland poster in Word, but Canva, that's Canva, is a really nice tool to be able to make standout graphics. So I asked my students to produce a poster or a PowerPoint around a taught topic. This was an example from last week. I gave my students 30 to 40 minutes with a review halfway through. So I find my students can't do much more than 20 minutes without losing track, whether they're remote or in class. So we had a review at 20 minutes and a little update on how we're getting on. I used a Teams poll to do that, which I just didn't distract them too much, but they could just say, yes, I'm doing fine, or no, I'm not, help. And I could help those that needed it. Now, what I was expecting, as I mentioned, from Canva was a selection of posters or infographics or whatever. What I got was very different. And I went, wow, this is amazing, given that I didn't even know you could do that. So students ended up submitting videos. It turns out Canva can make 30-second, minute-long videos based on templates. They just drag and drop the images in, and they type in the text they want, and then hit like generate, and it makes all the transitions and makes all the exciting stuff for them. Now, in this case, I wanted my students to focus on the content, not on the video production. That's another unit altogether. In this unit, we wanted the content, which I thought was fantastic. So they produced about 5 or 6 within the group of about 20 videos on the topic we were discussing, and then they shared them and they could play them all within Teams, and we had a little discussion around it. So what it reminded me of is actually let students be creative, lift the restrictions, because by default I defined I want a poster, which was very generic of me. I lifted the restrictions, or they lifted them naturally, and they flew. They absolutely took off. And some of the resources I got were better than the ones I would have probably given them as an example. So I think it just gives you an idea. If we aren't so focused on you must submit a typed document, you must submit a poster, just say, give me something that helps you learn about X, Y, and Z, or summarize this book using whatever methods you want, or explain how so and so feels in this book. I'm trying to do primary English here. I'm not very good at it, but I think just give them the freedom, and I think that really reminded me. yes, they didn't follow my instructions, but they produced some amazing stuff, and I was really pleased. So that was on Canva, which does all the posters and stuff, which is great, but it also does videos now, and it's all free. So that's brilliant. Okay. Moving on to the last couple of bits before we do some questions. We've got about 20 minutes left. I think it's really important to embrace students' views and feedback. And this applies to all ages. I think it could be any age at all. Most lessons, I'll run at least one poll, if not two, to gather student views and feedback really quickly. So if you're in Teams, you can click on the three dots just below the type a message box. And one of the options that pops up is forms, which is at the top by default. Click on that and you will receive, or you'll get this little panel here. And I tried to do it on this, but because I'm not the owner of this meeting, I didn't set it up. It wouldn't let me, but in a normal class you could. So you type in your question, type in the options, you can add as many as you want, and they can feedback very, very easily and very, very quickly how they're getting on, how they're feeling, what they're doing, etc. So most lessons I run a poll or two, and mid-lesson adaptation, as I mentioned earlier, really helps my students keep engaged and reach their potential, but also, slightly selfishly, the staff as well. Keeps me on my toes, because in a real classroom I'd be adapting and have 2 or 3 ways I could probably take this lesson, and it's very easy to these are live lessons, obviously. It's very easy just to stick to a rigid method that doesn't suit the class or doesn't suit where they're at. I have moved away from unmuting myself and going, right, listen up, I need to know how you're getting on. Could you please tell me how long you need on the task? If you've got 5 minutes left, 10 minutes left, are you done, whatever. But that a lot of them complained it made them jump, because I'd go from mute to hello and they'd jump. But actually it also means once they've answered, they haven't got to do anything. They answer the question, they hit submit, and they can forget, and they're back in the zone doing their work. It's very, very easy, and I'll probably use it in the classroom when we go back to real teaching as well, because it just, obviously in IT rooms, it sends it out to all of the computers, and they can go, I'm good, I'm not, hey, can I have some help? Especially for those that are a little bit afraid or shy or concerned about raising, or advertising their lack of ability. So I would really encourage forms or polls. It's called polls in Google Classroom and forms in Microsoft Teams. You can, if you go to the office.com website, you can view all the results that you've ever had for any polls. So if you wanted to, you could track, is student A always struggling? Are they always needing more time? You could see that if you wanted to, but I use it as a, on screen, off we go. The students can also see the results, so they can see, oh, good, everyone else needs 2 more minutes. I'm not the only one, which is a really nice thing for them. So yeah, we can't replace looking over their shoulder or in their books as we walk around, but we can use polls and some of this instant feedback without disrupting their learning to get an insight in a different way and adapt if needed. So moving on to adapt, which is our last couple of bits. I think it's really important to give students time to collaboratively work together. And this goes back to the title of this presentation, which is engagement. If we, luckily this is just under an hour session, but I think any more we'd all switch off. So I think working together in breakout rooms is a really important feature. Now you have these in Teams, and you can obviously, again with the 3 dots at the top, just like the poll, you can say split into 4 groups automatically, or you can put certain students in certain rooms. I throw my TAs in there as well, and I'll say, look, TA, can I'm going to put you in group 4 because student A is in there and they're the one you're working with, and they go in and they help them, and it's just like a breakout room you might have in a corridor somewhere, where they go and do that additional work whilst we move on with the rest of the class on some more advanced learning. So all of these little tools really help us. They don't replace the classroom, but I would say they work as well, if not a bit better in some cases. There's certainly no need to pack up, log off, move to another room, log in, come, so all of that time, 10 minutes wasted each, 5 minutes each side, is gone. So we can just crack on and get going. I've also, for my older students, and this I think could apply to anyone, but in my case it's my more able groups, I've been setting half-day or day-long projects, and this works when I have, and it's not very often, but when I have a group first thing and a group last, the same group. So we have 9, then we have a 3 o'clock to a 4:30 lesson. With a day-long project. So I have catch-up slots in between if they need me, or I'll catch up with them at the end, and I'll say, look, this is going to take you a while, but off you go. We've taught the whatever over the last week or two. We've looked at this book. We've looked at this bit of chemistry or whatever it is. Go and create X, Y, and Z in your group. You must all evidence that you've engaged and done something, and I'll be back to help you as you go, or back to review what you've done. So once again, this gives students ownership of their learning and lets them embrace the tools available to them, because they know how this works, especially my IT guys. But I think any student pretty much is very willing to adapt and try, even if some teachers who aren't as used to this tech are slightly not afraid, but cautious of it. So, maybe let's change how we are expecting them to engage, and let's adapt our lessons to suit. And that is really custom based on the subjects and the level you teach. But I think it's worth trying. So, support. The aim is undisturbed learning. That's why we're here. We want them fully engaged. We want them to log in, hopefully all the time, but if not in the high 90s. And for that to happen, I think we need to support the pastoral needs of our students. Now, this can be done using Teams or Zoom or whatever platform you're using. Again, with private rooms, you can have your one-to-ones. We actually record all of our student and teacher contact. Everything's recorded, such as this meeting, both for safeguarding purposes, but also for the students' benefit. They can go back and they can review a bit of the lesson that they may not have understood. And I don't know if you do record, but by default, when you record on Teams, it will upload it to the Microsoft Stream service, which is like YouTube but Microsoft's version. Only the teacher and the students and SLT, if your rights are set up in that way, can read it and view it. So their friends can't, and it can't be sent around the internet. It's all very much, you've got to be logged in to view it. But it does mean they can then review what they've missed or what they would like to know. We need to ensure students get the chance to have a one-to-one with their tutor. As you mentioned, that you call home sometimes and you have your tutorial or your pastoral input still. And I think it's really important to assign time for parents to contact the tutors. And the expectations. I say tutors, that's the term we use, the teachers, the class teacher, whatever. I think given that we're always, quote unquote, always online, the expectation can be that we reply within the hour or two, or maybe sooner. Well, actually, we're pretty busy. So we need to set expectations around that. And we could have office hours or similar, where you go, you know what, I'll be on Teams, and this is the link you can use to call me. This is to parents. You can call me on a Wednesday, 4 till 4:30. That's your slot. If you want to have a video conversation, of course you can email me, but if you want a live video conversation, let's book it for that slot, whatever it may be. And lastly, give parents access to the support websites. And this PowerPoint that I'll send out to you afterwards has links in the notes underneath. So you can click on them and have a look. Give them access to the support websites so that they can be the first students. So they can be the first place students ask instead of us. Especially in the case of primary, where it's often the parent and the student working together in a class or supporting each other. I think it's really important that parents, as busy as they are, of course, but they've got 1 or 2 or 3 children normally, not 30. So we need to ensure that they know where to look. For those that are willing and able to self-help, they can click on the links. And in the notes, I've got them all for you: the Microsoft link, Google, Blackboard, Moodle, etc. So it's all there for you. The other thing is that I haven't mentioned, that is in my notes, that I really want to mention, is make sure that we support our students in helping them know what a good working environment looks like. This might be more applicable for the secondary and up, or maybe year 5 and 6 and up, but actually you know, they don't know what an office looks like or a desk looks like. They've never had one. They use their bed, or the busy kitchen table or whatever. If they can have a space to work, and it's not always possible, but if they can, then that's great. And hopefully it's different and it's away from their bed, so they're not logging in and in their pajamas all day. Moving on with that, I also last week gave my tutor group, which are my level 2, so they nearly always haven't got their GCSE English or Maths, and they often have EHCPs and so on. I gave my students a fun task, and the Canva thing inspired me. I went, right, your task for the next 20 minutes or half an hour in tutorial, whilst I do one-to-ones in breakout rooms, is to click on this collaborative YouTube link that I made for them and to make a work songs playlist. So they put 183 songs into this playlist in about 25 minutes. And admittedly, some of them were not really working songs. I looked at it and went, "Ooh, that's gonna do anything but focus you." But whatever works for them. And whether they listen to it or not, I don't really mind. But it just gave them that collaboration back. It just gave them the chance to work together. And even the quiet ones that don't talk to me very much in the class, they were talking with each other over their teams whilst I was in breakout rooms with others, on what they should include and why. And they had 183 songs, which is about 2 days worth apparently, in this playlist. So it's not on the spec, it's not on the curriculum, it's not on my list, but I tell you what, they were buzzing afterwards. It really helped, and the lessons I taught them later that day or next day, they were on it. They were really up for it, just because I gave them a bit of chance to own what they were doing and to look after themselves rather than tell. This is just to remind you about the office hours. And I think what's really important, because, and I'm sure we're all guilty of this, because the office or the staff room or whatever we work is in our office or our kitchen or whatever, we're always available, or we can be available at all times. And it's really important, as much as staff are burning out, which we all are, it's really important, I think, to remind staff that they can click on their picture in Teams and they can change it to appear offline. Even if they're doing some planning for the next day or next week, they can appear like they're not there. And that stops a lot of attempts to contact you. So that it basically appear offline. They can also do not disturb, so people can still contact them, but it will say this person won't get a notification until they turn this off. So it's very, very important, I think, that when you're in a call, or like we are now, it would automatically change. But when we're just there doing our bit of work, or you've got half an hour between your meetings or whatever, I think it's really important just to manually say, you know what, the door's shut. No, I'm not here. Just like we'd shut the door in the real office. And students should do the same. I've said to students, you know what, if you want, especially my older ones, if you want to have that bit of time to go for a walk, and please do. It's called The Outside. It's quite a nice place. You might want to try it. Please do, go offline, say I'm away, don't take your phone with you. Or if you do, don't have Teams on it, and just say, you know what, I'm taking an hour. See you later. So both staff and students. And I've shared some of this with my students as well. You can also, here, where it says duration, you can click on your particular status and you can say, take it off at this time. So you haven't got to remember to appear back online or to appear back in the room. You can say automatically, put me back in the room. Okay, so I haven't lost the plot. I thought this was quite nice. This picture often gets thrown around in these sorts of CPDs. And this is Clinton Folger, who was a mail carrier in Nantucket. Now, cars were forbidden in this town where he delivered mail. So he owned a car. So he towed his car to the nearest highway, and then he could leave the horse there. I don't know how he did that, but he left the horse and he drove his car. And I've put this in because I think it really shows you we must embrace the change. We must allow staff to adapt. And if we do that, we can all benefit from a shift change in education. Now, I'm not saying we're going to go up to Mr. Hancock and say, look, let's change this here. All right. Or any other politician for that matter. Given the rate the education secretary changes, we might be a bit behind. But, I think we need to say, you know what, as some of you were doing, you mentioned at the start, we're going to adapt. We're going to do what we can. We're going to look after our staff and our students. And actually, if it requires adapting like this picture, then we will, you know. So hopefully that makes some sense. All right. Sorry, not Mr. Hancock. That's the health secretary. It's the wrong one. Anyway, whatever. Any Q&A? Any questions? We've got about 5 minutes before taking up a whole hour of your time. No? Okay, if you think of any, and I'm sure you will as soon as we click end, then do drop me an email. Don't phone me, because although it's on there, that phone is nowhere near me. All right, so it won't. Well, it works, but it won't ring. I won't hear it. So please email me. My name and my email is on there. Or if you would like to email kind of the EdTech demo generic email, you can just use that one there. Okay. And if you would like to, as you've done your PIDs, if you'd like to have some one-to-one support, or your staff support, in a CPD session on any topic pretty much, then request it and we'll deliver it. It's all free. It's all fully funded by DFE. It's not often we get something for free from them, so let's make use of it. And if you would like to, request something on Teams or OneNote, or marking, or automatic marking, that's a popular one, automatic marking, or whatever, then please do. Please just get in touch with me directly, or with the EdTech demo mail box, and we'd be really happy to help. I hope it's been of some use, and I hope I haven't gone too easy or too advanced. I hope it's just been, introduction and about the right level. If you try these insights and try these methods and it doesn't work, then get in touch, because it's normally a fairly simple fix, i.e. enabling it on the IT end, which your IT company could do with about 2 clicks. So if it doesn't appear, it'll be something simple. Just get in touch and we can try and help. Thank you all. I've got the emails of the 3 that are here, so I will email this video, or link this video out, which will be on our YouTube page, and I will email all the stuff that I mentioned, the parental guide for Teams for one, which I think is a really nice thing, because if we get parents on board, we're halfway there. Thank you all, and hopefully you found it useful.
Yeah, that's been really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you very much. It's been really
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Cheers. Bye. Mm-hmm.